If you're in nursing school next year and you're crying, I've got Kleenex in my office. Like, you can come. I'll sympathize with you. It's okay. I had some students that couldn't be here asked me if I could record, and I am going to record, so they can watch it later. And we just have a little bit of new stuff left in this unit. One weird thing about COVID times is I've not had crying in my office as much because I've not had people in my office as much. And like today, they had a family member, basically a family member, pass away from COVID, and it's like, here's my Kleenex. I'm so sorry. But I do have Kleenex and also snacks.
No.
So you can come. What do I have? I have little Luna bars and instant oatmeal and instant Indian food. That's what I've got right now. So kind of remember where we are right now. We're talking about innate immune system. The second line of defense, which is this set of processes. So we have process of phagocytosis, process of inflammation, process of fever. And then here's this category of antimicrobial proteins. And I want you to draw on here kind of 3 subgroups will help with this. So our 3 subgroups of the antimicrobial proteins that are second line of defense are complement.
Under inflammation, right?
Under antimicrobial proteins. Yeah. So complement, which is our pores, tunnels in a bacterial cell membrane. That one we got to last time. There's a set called interferons that are proteins that are antimicrobial. And then a group called antimicrobial peptides, or AMPs. And these 2 I didn't get to talk about last time, and I want to say what those are, because these 2, I'm pretty confident, are going to become treatments for people who are sick much more than they have been in the past. And until these past 2 years, nobody had heard of interferons, but they have been a COVID treatment the past couple of years for certain people. So it's nice to talk about them because maybe people have heard of it before. So an interferon is a chemical that your human cells make these. Human cells produce these chemicals called interferons. As warning signals. To the neighbor cells. Interferons are like a warning chemical to a neighbor cell. So when would cells make these? Cells make these when they themselves are infected with a virus. So here comes the virus. It infects the human cell, and when its genome is inside this cell, once in a while the human cell can tell that it's being infected. Like it can detect, oh my gosh, I have a virus infection. And it's kind of touching. They use their last remaining energy before the virus takes over them. and they will make interferon proteins and send them outside. So what they're calling IFN, those are the interferons. So this human cell that's infected uses up what energy it's got, and it starts making interferon proteins, and it just sends it into the environment. And those can be sensed by the uninfected neighbor, okay? The uninfected neighboring cells. And the neighboring cell can then prepare defenses against the virus. What we're calling here antiviral proteins. And it's kind of like, hey neighbor, get ready because I'm about to die from this virus, but maybe you'll have a chance if you get ready. So it's pretty cool. We need to add one word on here. It's not just any human cells, it's virus infected. Virus infected human cells can sometimes make these interferons. So the way that this has been used early on for COVID treatment is if a patient is really struggling and it's determined that they're overall pretty healthy and this is harsh to say, but they're worth spending the money on, the treatment on, we can give them interferons through an IV. So purify these or create them artificially in the lab and give them to people through an IV to try to help their uninfected cells get ready and give them a better chance. This is expensive, and it's not the same thing as antibody therapy. It's not monoclonal antibodies. We'll learn about that later. But there were some people early on that were able to get interferon therapy, like President Trump did, because he's pretty important as leader of the whole country. He got interferon therapy. It's expensive, and these are not like in wide lab production yet. But I think in the future they will be. And this will become much more widely used and much more available to people if they're struggling with a serious virus infection. And this one doesn't even have a title on it, but this goes with antimicrobial peptides, AMPs, is the title for this slide. And you can see here where on the picture they're showing the human antimicrobial peptide. It's this. And what these are is that these are very short protein chains. That's what a peptide is. So a peptide is amino acids linked together, but it's kind of too short to be called a whole protein, so we call it a peptide. And these antimicrobial peptides can wedge into bacterial membranes. And cause the bacterial cells to lyse or to break open. So we can see here that this antimicrobial peptide, it's kind of like it wedges into the membrane and it creates a little opening with a certain hydrophobic part that gets in here amongst the lipid tails. And that creates a gap between cytoplasm of the cell and the outside, and the cell will break up or burst. So antimicrobial peptide kind of does the same thing as complement, but it takes fewer pieces to do that. And these are pretty easy to produce. So these are fairly easy to produce in a lab, but they're kind of new and experimental. And what's cool about them is that they'll do this to a bacterial membrane, but not to our membranes. They leave ours alone. So it's bacterial specific, small little protein fragment, pretty easy to make. And I think in your all's lifetime, these will be much more used as a treatment. AMP is what they're called. So that's going to complete our new material for this unit. And I decided to put the stuff about epidemiology in the next unit and not try to rush and do that. So module 4, I have tentatively put that there, but I may rearrange it again before we actually get to next week for module 4. The other announcement is I went ahead and, like, if you did the quizzes that you definitely were supposed to do in this unit, I went ahead and did the curves on those. If you did extra ones that we really, like where we got off schedule, if you did an extra quiz, I curved those also. But probably the last 2 or 3, I'm just not counting them because we got kind of off schedule. So wanted to tell you that. So what I want to use the rest of the time for is to review this stuff. And yeah.
So the ones that are like mid-page, like they're not, that's not going to be on the test at all.
What is that? Oh, is that from epidemiology?
I'm not sure.
Probably.
Is diagnosing infections?
Yeah, I think that came out of this slide set actually. Yeah, if you were here every day and you have slides that don't have stuff, that's not going to be on the exam. And I think that one did have, there are some slides that we're not going to use.
Oh yeah, it says, sorry, it was from epidemiology.
It was from epidemiology.
So
Yeah.
don't throw it out, just keep it for next.
Yeah, if you've got the slides from the epidemiology part, don't throw them away, just keep them. And we will eventually cover at least part of that stuff in the next unit. Okay, so sometime yesterday in between labs, I sent this is the kind of the review topics, or these are the big things that are going to be on the next exam Friday. So definitely some questions about normal flora. Like what are they good for? And what would happen if you don't have the correct normal flora? And if you didn't watch those 2 short videos, go do that. And you may want to do that anyway because it's been a while now. So there'll be some multiple choice about the videos. Not a lot, but a few. And then our next topic has to do with progress of infections. So there are a couple of different things I want you to have memorized out of progress of infections. So I want to show what those are specifically. Okay. So these 5 steps, how an infection develops in a person and then leaves the person. You need to have these stages memorized and write them down in order. 5 of these 5. And then the other listing part that has to do with progress of infection is the graph. And every year I have students mix up these 2 things, like, because they're both about infections. So the stages of the microbe developing an infection, there's 5. And this year I put on the test, list the 5 stages of blah, 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 so that you don't mix these up. So this is the 5 stages from a microbe point of view. Oh, here's a place where we didn't use these slides. It's also the end of this slide set. Where's the graph? Was it on this one? This. There we go. Okay, so you also need to be able to draw this graph. And on that question, I think it says, draw the graph and label the axes, blah, blah, blah. So those are two separate things. Make sure that you're doing the graph on the graph part and the list of 5 on the list of 5 part. So you want to draw this graph, and please note, this is not the stage name. The stage name of stage 3 is period of invasion. So I'm going to be looking for period of invasion. If you also decide to put on there height of infection, just like this, that's okay, as long as you also know that this whole stage is called period of invasion. So this will be kind of like the last time we had a graph, and it says draw the graph, label the axes in 7 or 8 points, and then under this you'll have questions about the individual stages.
So you don't care about height of infection?
Like, it's okay if it's there, but I feel like there's always somebody that, like, height of infection is what this stage is called. It's period of invasion is the stage name. Yeah, if you don't put it, that's fine. But if you don't say that the 3rd stage is period of invasion, that's not fine. So make sure that you can draw this. Wish I could like cover this up. Note what this is. Symptoms. This is a measurement of symptoms. Yeah, you do need to draw the line. I'm not as picky about how it looks as so when we had the growth curve and you had to draw the line that was definitely like this, and then it's steep, then it levels off, and then it starts to go down. Like this is similar. This is similar. But there's some parts of it that are more important than others. Like this part had better be flat if you're not feeling anything. Because it's measuring how does the person feel. And if they feel fine, they're in incubation period. The minute they start to feel anything, they're in prodromal. And then when it starts to get way worse, like it gets steeper, then they're in period of invasion. And then when they start to feel a little bit better, then they're in convalescent. So the slopes matter, but having it like this double sloped thing here, I don't know what their point is with that. But this being steeper than this is also pretty important. So you do need to draw the line, not just label the stages, but draw a line that makes sense for this.
So we just need to make the line and all the stages, so we don't need to like put like initial exposure, height of infection.
Yeah, you would not have to put initial exposure here, but you do need time, which is covered up by this. That's what's underneath there, time. And then some of the questions underneath might relate to this or this, but you don't have to have initial exposure and height of infection on the graph itself. Yeah. But this is one of the key things from microbiology long-term is knowing what these mean and how people feel and how you tell when they're in one versus the other. So that's one of the big topics. Infection scenarios, we're going to spend the end part of class practicing those, but innate versus acquired. that's something else you want to look over. So what makes innate immunity different from acquired? What? That's not what I wanted to do. So the stuff that we wrote right here, key, study that. If you're an AMP2, you had AMP2, that's the same stuff that we learned about there, but it's really key to know those differences. Big picture stuff, how are these two different? And then from the innate immunity slides, the part that I'm going to have big questions about are inflammation. So these pictures, and then especially the stuff we wrote on the board next to these pictures, steps of inflammation and especially the signs of inflammation. Study that really well. And that's also duplicated with AMP2. These two things are so important that even people that not going into nursing need to know that, like as part of human body function. So there'll be a couple of big points questions about that. The rest of the stuff in innate immunity is going to be multiple choice type things. So you still need to study this, but it's going to be in multiple choice questions here and there, but inflammation is the most important. So now I want to look at the practice questions, because that's the biggest amount of points on the test, or the infection scenarios. On the Friday test, it's basically set up just like this, basically the same word bank, except you have 3 scenarios and they have a lot more detail than these. So these are ones that I used to use, and then I decided they don't have enough detail, so I made them practice questions. So on the Friday test, you've got the word bank. It's 3 scenarios with a lot more detail, and the whole thing together is 30 points. So the way that I grade these is I will make a key that has all the answers. And then I decide, like I think, I figure out, okay, if there are supposed to be 24 correct answers on the whole page, then I want you all to be able to get 20 of them or something like that. And then they would be worth 2/3 of a point or something like that, annoying a piece. And then if you get more than what I set as the minimum number, they become a bonus. Please note, it's a choose all that apply. So you want to leave time for this. Like don't leave this till the end and be like, okay, I'm gonna write 3 here and 2 on the part B. Make sure that you have enough time and that you are listing everything that actually applies to that situation. If you put one that is not right, so say that you put something is zoonotic and it's just totally not. Like, where did you come up with that? It's a -1/2 or something like that. Or if they're each worth 2/3 of a point, it would be -1/3 if you put extra irrelevant stuff. So these take me a while to grade, but nursing NCLEX loves the choose all that apply. Students hate it, but it is what it is. So get together with somebody close to you And let's kind of do 2 of these at a time. See if I can get there we go. Discuss with your neighbor, A and B. And pick out from this word list, which ones of those apply to these scenarios. Okay, I don't have chronic on this word bank. The word bank on the real test has everything.
That's chronic.
Is the,
Prior.
what is it? The HPI in the hospital? The one you get in a hospital?
HAI.
HPI,
Yeah,
is that gonna be on there?
it should be.
Primary infection.
Note to self. Yeah, whatever terms I actually have on the test are what I'm looking for. So you've got some terms that will be on your test that are not in this word bank. Like I need to add HAI and there's chronic and acute are not on here, but they would be on the other ones. So let's, for part A, what have you got here?
Direct, primary.
It is direct because this is a fluid to fluid disease transmission. And I think I heard did someone say horizontal?
Wouldn't it be vertical?
I think it would be vertical.
No, that's what I was-
Yeah. Horizontal is when it's not dependent on the genetic relationship of the person. I started writing it because you said it, but it's vertical in this
Does
case.
direct only fall under horizontal, or does it fall under N?
Does direct fall under
Like
horizontal?
if you're vertical,
Oh.
you can't be direct.
Horizontal can either be direct or indirect, but not both. Vertical is always direct. And because it's always direct, like the book doesn't put those two terms together. But that's a good question. Yeah. Vertical always goes with direct. I heard somebody say primary. Like every infection technically is a primary infection. It's the first one that happened.
So every single one of these always be a primary infection?
You ought to be writing primary for
For
all
every
of them?
single one?
yeah.
Yeah.
If you're listening right now, there's always somebody that doesn't. What else on this? Are there any others that apply? Yeah, acute. It could be acute. And when I wrote this question and put it on the test, I realized that students don't really know a lot about chlamydia and like what it does to the baby. So that's why I took it back off. But depending on what it did to the baby, it could be a local infection if it's causing blindness, or it could be systemic, but you don't have enough info really to determine that from here. Let's do any others that people had? on this one?
Would you say she's asymptomatic?
The mom would be asymptomatic. Is that in the word list?
No. Oh, she's.
Yeah, she would be. Well, let's hope that she was. I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm gonna assume she was for my kid,
Yeah.
my sake.
like, I would need to put in there, the mom never felt a thing before she went, the mom probably is asymptomatic. You would hope, like if she didn't get medical care.
Where's the cute at?
It's not on there.
Would
It's
that
not
be
in the
an
word
extra
bank.
point then?
If you come up with one, like if I miss something out of the word bank and you put a correct one that's not in there, I would make it a bonus.
Oh,
Yeah.
So the types of carriers.
Yeah, the types of carriers would be in the word bank. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so B part, malaria, it is zoonotic.
Primary?
It's not person to person.
This one, I would be okay if you put horizontal. It's not directly person to person, but the mosquitoes can move it person to person. This would be considered, let's see, it's insect. This would be considered indirect. Because it's not as common that the mosquito is biting Jeremy and then it directly comes over and bites me and moves it that way. Like the parasite is within the mosquito. So when I used to put this on the real test, I would accept direct or indirect on this because y'all don't know much about malaria at this time. Like you need more on that. Other ones that would apply to this, malaria is systemic. Like it gets in your blood and it's everywhere in your body. So it would be systemic. What'd you say?
Would it be acute?
It could be either.
So,
That's why I took, this is not enough info.
yeah.
This is not enough
Give us
info.
like a paragraph.
They're pretty detailed now.
This is
Yeah.
what it does.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like new teacher kind of questions. Like, oh, here you go. Every time I write a new question, I like see how it goes. But you can imagine like when you write a whole new test and it's all new questions and then you're grading it like, dang it.
So if you, say like it had, the question was about, like streptococcus and then turning into scarlet fever, that would be secondary infection. Because,
It's not a secondary because it's the same thing again. But it would be focal.
oh,
Yeah. Oh wait, is that like this one down here? Yeah, E. Let's go over this one because this one has more info on it. And it's addressing the streptococcus situation. It is horizontal. It's two kids that them getting the disease that depend on their genetic relationship to each other.
direct, because of the,
It is direct because they are swapping spit basically on a Gatorade bottle. What'd you say? There's a primary infection. What'd you say? Fomite? The bottle is a fomite. Might need the word list.
would it be acute?
This would be considered an acute type of disease in the first kid that had the sore throat. That's acute.
Wait, did we say B had horizontal?
What was
Did we
horizontal?
say E had horizontal?
B?
Sorry.
I mean, I would accept horizontal. I decided to move on from that because it's just not enough info to be a good question. But
You said focal.
yeah, this would be focal, where you have the disease first starts in one place and then it moves to a second place, but it's the same thing twice. It's the same, it's the same bacteria, the same microbe.
We have two different types of primary.
Not systemic.
If you said systemic on this one for friend 2, which you don't have to say kid 1, kid 2. I accepted systemic on this because rheumatic fever can be considered systemic as well. So when I make the key, I kind of have answers that are like, this is definitely an answer. And then I have a list of, okay, if you put that, it could be that way. And then there's some that's just, no, that's, like if you put zoonotic on this, it's just not, there's no animal involved. And it would not be vertical. See if there's another. Yeah, this one's good to practice.
For this exam, are there gonna be like a lot of multiple choice?
It's not huge number, about the usual number, maybe a few more. I did have to write some new ones, so if you see a multiple choice, no, they're not new ones. They, I've used them before. I've used them before. There might be one new one, but.
There be a secondary infection.
Here's secondary.
Primary is.
Yeah, there had to be a primary. The primary was with Proteus. The secondary is the yeast. So this one's primary and secondary. Is it acute? Yeah, we're gonna say that, you hope that UTI is acute and not chronic, probably acute. Local, yeah. Somebody else say another one?
Would be focal too.
It's not really focal. So you have two locations. You've got urinary tract and you've got vagina. But focal is when the one microbe moves to the second place. And this is not really, it's two different ones. So it's really two locals, two local infections. What about horizontal vertical?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You don't really know from this
Oh,
how she got the UTI. So if it said she got the UTI after having sex, then it might be horizontal, we hope. But sometimes people get a UTI from their own self.
We'll call it HAI.
This would not be a HAI. Yeah. Yeah. This one C right here, this one would be healthcare acquired. Because it's the patient care tech that's giving it to the second patient.
That would be.
That would also be mixed.
Instead of patient giving birth.
Yeah, this one has a lot of good detail. So
Sounds very chronic.
it's passive carrier, passive transmission. It's hospital healthcare acquired. Patient number 2 has a mixed infection. Is it direct or indirect? It's indirect. And there would be a fomite somewhere involved here, most likely.
Pills.
Pills,
Yeah.
fomite, yeah.
Hands.
Would that be horizontal?
It's horizontal. Yeah, horizontal indirect via a fomite. You have a passive carrier in the patient care tech. It's a mixed infection. This part, patient 2 having shock, that's a systemic. They got systemic and it got all through their blood. And they would have acute intense problems. One thing to keep in mind is you don't have to have everything perfect on this. So I'll count up how many I think are great, perfect answers. And then some percentage of that is what I want you to have. And then if you've got extra ones that are good, it becomes a bonus. But think through these. Think through these. Give yourself enough time and make sure you're picking all the ones that apply.
Which one do you think is gonna be easier, the lab exam or this exam?
It depends on the person.
Hard to guess.
I don't know. Like if you're good at bulk memorizing, the lab exam is easy because that's a bulk memorization. Like there's nothing on it that's tricky, that's not in your notes. This is more tricky if like you're applying knowledge. It just depends. I don't know. I think that my in this class, in my lower level classes, the lecture exams are harder than the lab exams because I'm asking you stuff that maybe sometimes you can't just memorize it. Yeah.
It's just like microscopic things that you're just trying to like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like with the bones, like I could be like, this small.
But you have to know the words in the first place.
I know, but like at least I can see it.
You got stuff to see in the lab exam. It's right there.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Pick it up. Look. Read the label. Read the label.
Oh, what's it?
Right.
No, like, somebody else did it, and I was like, you know what, and I realized that it smells so bad.
She didn't say it was you, she said somebody.
I said somebody.
I love it, I guess.
And then the stuff that we put in, it didn't smell any better.
Yeah, that, you smell the dogs too?
No, you had to